Hi everyone, I'm Miranda and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm really excited to share a suggested reading list for October. I've gathered together a big pile of books from a horror story to some cozier reads and books with elements of the bizarre and supernatural in them. And I think all of these would make great choices for the month ahead. I can't wait to share them with you. I've gathered together quite a big pile of books that I don't think I've ever recommended on the channel before. So let's dig in and get started. First up, I received this book, The Love Child by Edith Olivier, in the post yesterday, and I sat down and read it in one evening. It really is only novella length. It's a very slim book, so you can get through it very quickly, and it's the perfect choice to pick up on a cold autumnal evening, maybe when you're sitting by a roaring fire and you want a slightly spooky read. The Love Child definitely fits that bill because there's a strong element of the supernatural in this story. It's almost like a kind of ghost story. It was first published in 1927 and has just been republished as part of the British Library Women Writers series, which is a series of books that I'm really enjoying, so I was really keen to read this latest. And it definitely didn't disappoint, but it is a very bizarre tale. It's about a woman in her early 30s called Agatha Bodenham, and at the start of the book, her mother has just died, and Agatha realizes how very lonely her life is. And she suddenly recollects that when she was a young child, she had an imaginary playmate called Clarissa. Her mind goes back more and more to the fun that she used to invent with Clarissa, and almost slightly ashamedly, she starts to imagine playing with Clarissa again. The more she thinks about Clarissa, the more real Clarissa appears to her. And one day Agatha is really shocked to discover that other people, the servants, the gardener in the household, can see Clarissa too. She has somehow materialized so that everyone else can see her, and Agatha is really at a loss as to how to explain this sudden presence of an 11-year-old child in her household and in her life. And she claims that Clarissa is her love child. The servants don't really believe that, knowing Agatha, but they go along with it. And certainly Clarissa is in many ways a love child. She's a child born from Agatha's deep longing for companionship. And this longing also speaks to something that was very much felt perhaps by women of that time. In the interwar years, there was what was called a surplus of women after so many men were killed during World War I. Many women were having to live lives as single women, and although some were very happy with that choice, others perhaps were not. And whilst a lot of women were happy to be childless, for others that was a great burden to bear. And this story explores the tale of a woman who is very lonely, who perhaps would be yearning to have a child herself. And somehow through the force of her longing and her imagination, she creates one out of thin air. The relationship between Clarissa and Agatha becomes more strained as Clarissa grows older, and it's very evident that their mysterious tie to each other, is in many ways quite precarious. Agatha's love for Clarissa becomes more and more obsessive, and at the end it becomes very clear that Clarissa is unable to love anybody else apart from Agatha. So this is a very bizarre, almost ghost story. Edith Olivier herself definitely believed in the supernatural. There's some excerpts from her autobiography at the end of this book, which are very interesting to read. And in these excerpts, she describes some events that happened to her that she thought were unexplainable. and they're definitely quite supernatural events. So it's really interesting to read the book from that perspective. I also think that this is very much a book about loss as well, and how loss affects individuals. Edith Olivier wrote this very soon after the death of her most beloved sister. So although you can read this as a woman's real yearning for a child, for companionship, I also think it's a very subtle story about the devastation of grief and of loss. But it's really a great one to choose to pick up on an autumn evening. It's a real page turner, and although so much of it is quite bizarre, there are also a few very funny incidents that actually had me laughing out loud. So there's a lot of slightly dark humour in this as well. But yes, one I recommend. Then October's comfort book club pick is, of course, 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff. I run the comfort book club with my mum, and this is the book that we'll be discussing on the last Friday of October. So please do read along with us this month if you would like to, and join in our discussion video at the end of the month. Of course, this is such a classic. I've picked it for an October comfort book club choice because the first letter starts on the 5th of October 1949 from Helene Hanff to the bookshop at 84 Charing Cross Road. This is a special type of memoir. It's really a collection of letters that Helene Hanff wrote to this bookseller over the course of many years. It's a real love letter to books and to readers. It's such a favourite of mine and of many people's. It's a great comfort book classic, and I hope you'll be reading along with us, or at least feel inspired to maybe pick this up and dip into some of the letters throughout this month, because you definitely will feel lovely and cozy reading this one. Then I have to recommend this great trilogy. The first in the series is called Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, and then there's The Vanishing Stair and The Hand on the Wall. But these are great books to pick up in the autumn. Truly Devious starts out at the end of summer, but then it progresses into early autumn, and The Vanishing Stair really goes on through October and the lead up to Halloween. So it's definitely a fun trilogy to pick up, and it's all about mysteries and mystery lovers. So in Truly Devious, a young girl is accepted into a very elite kind of school, the Ellingham Academy, and this academy accepts very few students, and all of these students are exceptionally talented in some way. Now, what's her name? I think it's no, not Ellie. Stevie. Now, Stevie has been accepted into the academy because she is obsessed by crime. She wants to be a detective when she's older, and she really wants to solve a cold crime case that took place at the Ellingham Academy in the 1930s. So this story shifts between Stevie's adventures in the present day and a crime that was committed in the 1930s. So the focus shifts back and forth. And of course, as the reader, you're trying to solve the crime along with Stevie. And then a mysterious death occurs in the present day as well. And Stevie really starts to question everything that she's seeing around the academy and what motivates her fellow students. So this is a great page turner. I mean, it will leave you absolutely gripped, and the Stevie solves the mystery all through the sort of 3 books. So as soon as you finish one, you just want to move on to the other one. They keep you really, really wanting to find out what's happened. And there are lots of riddles. title Truly Devious comes from a letter in a sort of riddle form that was sent to the founder of the Ellingham Academy in the 1930s before a major kidnapping happened. But there are quite a few other riddles that come up that, again, as the reader, you're trying to solve, you're trying to piece together all of these clues, and it's just a really fun, quite interactive read in that sense. But Stevie Bell, the main character, is very endearing, as are many of her friends, and yeah, the setting is Vermont too, so there's a lot of beautiful fall landscape, there's pancakes, maple syrup, lots of great fall coziness in this as well, but it's also just a fun mystery series, so recommend those. Then, if you want something really quite scary, I have to recommend Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This one, I have to say, was a bit too scary for me. I read this back in the summer and it was a bit different from what I was expecting. I thought this would be a historical novel with a bit of a gothic twist to it, and actually it's a very gothic novel with quite a lot of horror in it, and horror is a genre I generally don't read at all, but if you are going to read horror at some point, then October's probably a good month for that, and if you like scarier reads, then you would enjoy this. But if you don't like scary reads, then I do warn you that this is quite scary. However, the premise is really good. It's set in 1950s in Mexico, and it's about a young woman called Noemi who receives a mysterious letter from her cousin who has recently married a man that Noemi's family really don't know much about, and he's taken her off to the Mexican mountains. This letter is quite hysterical and it hints at all sorts of dark doings and mysterious happenings, and it's quite disturbing. Noemi doesn't know what to think. Is her cousin sort of losing her mind, or are some of her rather rambling accusations against her husband true? Is he trying to maybe take her money, for instance? What is really going on? So Noemi sets off to find out and to help her cousin, and she arrives at a very sinister house that's very much in the classic British Gothic mansion style, and has been owned by a British family for generations in Mexico, and they were involved in mining the land around the house. Noemi soon finds out that there's a very dark history to this family that her cousin has married into. There's a horrific story about one of the daughters of the household in bygone years who seemingly went mad and shot almost every member of the family. The figurehead of this family is a very sinister character, an elderly man who Noemi is sort of deeply uncomfortable around, and more she senses this evil presence within the house. She starts to have very strange dreams, and she begins to question her own sanity a little bit as the story progresses and odder things start to happen. She's not quite sure what to make of them, but she does find an ally within the household. I won't say any more because I don't really want to spoil it, but there definitely is a strong element of the supernatural in this. There is a lot of violence as well as the story progresses. There are some really quite violent and quite graphic scenes, so do be aware of that. But if you want something that is really scary, that will really chill the blood, then definitely give this a go this month. Okay, and then I recently discovered, and I feel I must be about one of the last people to discover this trilogy, but it's the Discovery of Witches trilogy by Deborah Harkness. This is the first one, actually called A Discovery of Witches, And I picked up this book because I watched the TV series, which is a few years old, but I'd never heard of it before, but I was looking for something that would give all the sort of autumnal vibes and that would be quite a fun show to watch. I stumbled on a discovery of witches, started watching it, and I was absolutely hooked. My mum loved it as well. There are some beautiful autumnal scenes. The beginning is all set in Oxford, and there are lots of beautifully shot scenes of Oxford in the autumn, lots of library scenes. It's just really cozy and atmospheric. And I decided to pick up the book and to read it, and I've really enjoyed it. My mum, I think, has read them all now too. I'm a bit behind her, but she's read them all and has really enjoyed the series as well. And this is, I don't know, it's a bit like Harry Potter, but for grown-ups. It's about a young woman called Diana, and she is a witch, but she very much doesn't want to be a witch, and she refuses to use her magic. She has instead become a professor, and when the story begins, she's at Oxford working on a research project when she calls up, almost by accident, a mysterious book from the Bodleian Library. As soon as she gets this book, she realizes it's actually a magical text. And after looking at it briefly, she decides she wants nothing to do with it and sends it back. But calling up this book sets in motion a whole chain of events that are really very exciting and that bring a certain vampire into Diana's past. Now, there are definitely some Twilight elements to this story, but I have to say I really enjoyed it. I don't generally read a lot of fantasy, but I really did have fun reading this one. Partly, I think, because an old book's an important part of the plot. So that's always a plus for any book lovers. And I just thought it was a really good page turner. So if you want a book that, again, has an element of the supernatural, has vampires, has witches, has demons, all of that kind of stuff, and you haven't given this a go yet, then I really recommend it. And I also really recommend watching the TV series. I found that really brought the story to life, actually, and it's just so visually stunning. It's one of those rare examples where I almost like the TV series better than the book, but I also found that it really complements reading the book very well because you can just picture the scenes. So yes, definitely get cozy over the autumn and curl up with this and maybe the TV show too. I think you would enjoy it. Now, this book is going to be on my bedside table throughout October. I've spoken before about how much I enjoy short stories. This is a collection of short stories. It's called Murder by the Book, Mysteries for Bibliophiles, edited by Martin Edwards. It's part of the British Library Crime Classics series. This sounds perfect for me for my bedside table book. I'm going to really enjoy picking this up and just dipping into it before I go to sleep. It says, a bookish puzzle threatens an eagerly awaited inheritance. A submission to a publisher recounts a murder that seems increasingly to be a work of non-fiction. An irate novelist puts a grisly end to the source of his writer's block. There is no better hiding place for clues or red herrings than inside the pages of a book. But in this world of resentful ghostwriters, indiscreet playwrights, and unscrupulous book collectors, literary prowess is often a prologue to disaster. So this just sounds like a really fun collection of short stories. I love reading mysteries this time of year, and this will be my bedside table book for the month ahead, so I'm excited about that. Then I wanted to speak about this mystery series. It's the Letitia Rodd Mysteries by Kate Saunders. This is the first in the series. There are now 3 of them. This one is called The Secrets of Wishtide, and I so recommend this. It starts in October. It says it was a bright, windy October morning, and Mrs. Bentley and I were down in the basement kitchen making a rabbit pudding. The story is set in 1850. And the character is a recently widowed middle-aged woman who is also a part-time private detective. And this helps her eke out a meagre income that she's surviving on, living in Hampstead, but in rather straitened circumstances. Her brother is a famous barrister who often defends possible murderers or thieves, and his sister Letitia Rhodes helps to get them off and helps her brother when he needs a bit of discreet investigation. So in this book, she is contacted by her brother when he has a client that reaches out, and this is a very wealthy man who wants to prevent his son from marrying a woman that he thinks is, well, for one, that she has a rather mysterious past that she isn't being truthful about, and that she is also a really unsuitable choice for his wealthy son. She's from a much poorer background. Letitia Rhodes agrees to go undercover as a governess in this house to find out more about the situation. I don't want to spoil it, so I won't say too much, but I think that this is a really well-written series. It's a great one to pick up in the autumn. Like I said, it starts in October and it goes all through to Christmas. There are some lovely scenes where Letitia Rhodes does some Christmas baking, and there are some real sort of cozy elements to the story, but it is also a real mystery. It soon becomes clear that there's someone who is tracking down certain people who are connected in a mysterious way and killing them, and Letitia Rhodes has to find out why. So there are some gruesome elements to the plot, but in general I found it quite a cozy sort of mystery read, and it's one that I really enjoy. I know there are a lot of like Victorian mystery books, but I think this is one of the best of them because I think Kate Saunders is a really strong writer. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one. Then for something completely different, I wanted to recommend this book, Family Sabbatical by Ryrie Brink. I think this was first published maybe in the 50s. Yeah, it was first published in 1956. I loved this book as a child, and I recently got it again. This is like quite a modern paperback version, which is unfortunately not so attractive, but I'm just so glad that the story is still available because I think it's really charming. It's about a family who go to the south of France when their father is on sabbatical. And it starts in October. One of the young girls in the family decides to keep a diary of their adventures as they move from the States to France, and her diary begins on October 1st. And some of my sort of best loved scenes that I remember from the book are when they try to celebrate more American holidays, but in France. So there are some great descriptions of celebrating Halloween, for instance, in France, and Thanksgiving in France, and how they sort of attempt to do this. But it's really just a very sweet, very engaging family story, and I think lots of young people would really enjoy this, but it also makes a lovely cozy read for adults as well. So another one I recommend. Then for some more short stories, but a little bit spookier, a little bit more fantastic, I would recommend Grimm Tales for Young and Old, retold by Philip Pullman. I just love the cover on this. I think that that is really gorgeous. And I think fairy tales, folk tales, those are all the sorts of things you want to read during October. I think this month of reading really lends itself to books that explore the fantastic a little bit, and I think that this would be a great collection of short stories as well to just dip into throughout the month. And then finally, A book that is on my to-be-read pile for this month that I really want to get to is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I've never actually read this, so I'm really keen to pick it up. And Whitby, with its incredible ruined abbey, is partly what inspired Dracula, and that is in Yorkshire, of course. Mum and I have been to Whitby before, but we really want to go again, and I want to read Dracula before we go there this month. So really looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to trying the book because so many people say it's actually a lot better than you might expect. So I'm very intrigued, and of course Dracula has a lot to answer for in terms of starting off a whole genre of vampire and general supernatural fiction. So I am really intrigued to read this one. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed my list of suggested reads for October. Let me know if you're keen to pick up any of these over the month ahead, or what books you might be reading in October. I'm very keen to hear. But thank you so much for watching. I just wanted to say that I won't be posting videos next week, partly because it's my birthday week next week, so I'm giving myself a little time off, which I'm looking forward to, but I also have quite a lot of work to get ready and try to do ahead of time, because Mum and I will be off to London the following week. So I want to have things ready for then. We're really excited about that. But yes, thank you so much for watching. An extra big thanks this week too to the people who have bought me a tea on my Buy Me a Coffee page. I was so grateful to everyone who did that this week. It's always such a lovely surprise when I get that notification. So extra special thank you to all of you. Do give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and you can subscribe to my channel by clicking on my face that pops up over here. So I won't see you next week, but I'll see you again after that. Goodbye.